This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
Hello, college football fans, and welcome to the Primetime Podcast. My name is Ricky Widmer, and as always, I'm joined by the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are here today. This is the last one. Well, last one, I don't think we've decided if we're going to touch the non-Power Fives next week. The Group of Five, that's what they're called. We haven't discussed if we're going to touch them next week, but I know how Brandon is, and I don't think he wants to touch the Group of Five. So this may be our last preseason kind of preview of a conference before we get into actual football talks for getting ready for the season. And we get to talk about your conference today, the one that you love, buddy.
I know, it's exciting, isn't it? We saved the best for last.
Well, it's the best. I'm using air quotes because there are some teams that I feel like can beat the SEC, but no, they've dominated every other conference heading into, I don't know, forever. But if you guys are new to how we do our previews for college football, what we're doing is we're going to look at the East Division first. That's going to be part one. We're going to look at part two, which will be the West. And at the end, we'll kind of give you who we think it was going to play in the title game and who could represent the SEC, I'll say, from the college football playoff, because there's going to be an SEC in that college football playoff. You can put your hat on that. But we are going to look at the East first. And before we look, we're going to spend most of our time, I'll be honest, on Georgia, Tennessee, and Florida. So I apologize to all the other four teams in this division. However, there are three I kind of want to touch, Brandon. The first one is just South Carolina on the fact that Will Muschamp, can he make a difference? Can he make a difference for the Gamecocks?
I think that you take a look at what he did in his time at Florida, and Will Muschamp was, he was okay. I think that's they went through a lot of starting quarterbacks under Will Muschamp, 3 offensive coordinators, and they really didn't have a good offensive attack. What South Carolina needs is an offensive attack. And unless Muschamp is willing to try something different, I don't necessarily see South Carolina being all that good. I think that when we talked, I think before, multiple weeks ago, maybe a month or two ago, about coaches on the hot seat, I think that I was one who brought up Will Muschamp because you take a look at what he did in Florida and then what he's going to have to do there in South Carolina. He's going to have to get them going because that's a team that has just been down for a long time. And if he can't get them going quickly in that first year and show some promise for year two, I don't know if he's gone right away, but he's already, I feel like he's already on a short leash. And a lot of guys are when they go to a team that's already not that great. They expect results. They expect better results. So honestly, if they win 5 games, that'd probably be better results. But he's going to be in for a difficult task, I think, trying to work with a team that doesn't have, when you look at other teams within the SEC, and they are good teams, I don't know if South Carolina has the attack. I don't think that South Carolina has the same offensive and defensive playmakers that other teams have there in that conference to be competitive.
Well, that's my main point for South Carolina. I will try to keep this short, and I will try to keep this sweet. Basically, they're losing Pharaoh Cooper. That's going to be huge. You're losing your main wide receiver target who said, yeah, I could come back for a senior year, but I'm not. I'm going to go play in the NFL and get my money. Then the second thing for this offense is they have one of the most interesting, I'm going to say, the most compelling quarterback competitions. And I'm going to even throw out the word controversy because we don't know who's going to start for Will Muschamp and Kurt Roper, the offensive coordinator, because they have 5 scholarship quarterbacks on the roster. You have guys like Perry Orth, didn't play in the spring game because of a collarbone. Sophomore Lorenzo Nunez didn't play because of a knee. You've also got freshman Brandon McElwain. He's going to be there. We also got Connor Mitch. You have a guy, Michael Scarnecchia, and it's just sometimes it's teams we're picking out of 3, and we have a hard enough time picking who's going to be the starter out of 2 or 3 guys. They've got 5 guys. 5 guys. And I mean, you could say, well, Ricky, that question is easy. Perry Orth is the guy. He's the incumbent starter, but he didn't play in the spring game. And I mean, you can say, well, Ricky, just because he didn't play in the spring game doesn't mean he's not going to start. But if that collarbone injury lingers, Will Muschamp's success to me is all going to come on who does he have? Who does he have to be a starting quarterback? Because the quarterback is the most important position no matter what level of football that you play. It's the most important.
It is. I think it's the absolute most important because no matter who you've got out there, and I've talked about this before, I mean, you have a solid running back, you have a star running back, the quarterback spot is still very important out there to be able to be the leader out there on the field. And yeah, the Gamecocks have a ton of question marks, specifically at quarterback, and that's not good. And you look at other again, I said it before, you look at other spots all around the football, offensively, defensively, they have few proven skill players on that team. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is a complete rebuild year. Everyone knows that. If they're good, I would be so surprised. And by good, I mean win like 3 games. But it is a team right now that if they can just move forward, mm-hmm. win some maybe 1 or 2 games that people wouldn't expect. And I'm not talking like beat an Auburn or beat a Georgia or something like that, but they beat maybe a team where, okay, we were really thinking we were going to give this one to Kentucky, but the Gamecocks won it. Those you got to take the small victories, and that would be a victory, but a small one. And
really quickly, that was one of the next 2 teams I just wanted to ask you about before we get into the big 3. Kentucky and Vanderbilt, because these are teams that, I mean, Kentucky 5 wins last year, Vanderbilt 4 wins. Derek Mason and Mark Stoops switch them around. They're the Kentucky and Vanderbilt coaches. Could they be on hot seats this year? Because I know with me, Vanderbilt, it's kind of like, okay, you're entering the 3rd year. We thought Mason would kind of be on a hot seat last year, but to me, out of these 2, the one that could be a sleeper is Kentucky. I mean, they get a close win over South Carolina last year. That game's going to be at home this year. And I mean, they had close games to Florida, a Will Muschamp-led team. They have a 3-point loss to Auburn. That could easily be flipped around. A 4-point loss to Vanderbilt. They lost some close games. So this Kentucky team, I think, won't be the one to be as nervous of Stoop losing his job or them being as bad as they were last year, I'm going to say, because, I mean, 5 wins didn't get you a bowl game. I think if I'm a Vanderbilt fan, I am more worried of, okay, what are we going to do post James Franklin, because we still haven't been able to figure it out.
I think you're right, and I think that you take a look at Kentucky. They were 5-7 last year. They missed out on a bowl appearance again.
1 game, 1 stinking win. That's all they needed.
I know. But this year, you have to also realize that they're going to be playing under their 3rd different offensive coordinator in now 3 seasons.
That ain't good.
That's not good. That's absolutely not good at all. And I think that's part of it. One reason I'm going to point to an NFL situation here. So Alex Smith, people loved Alex Smith mm-hmm. coming out of college. This is going to be the guy. He goes to the 49ers and he never panned out. And part of that is to him. He did not play as well as people expected him mm-hmm. to play, but he really never had the opportunity to stay in a system. Head coaches, offensive coordinators, both of those mm-hmm. things worked against him. He went to Kansas City, and he's not bad. He's not Tom Brady good, but he's not Jamarcus Russell bad. He is in the middle, I would say more on the middle trending up.
Well, he's also got the walrus talking to him from the sideline.
He's got a good offensive coordinator. Mm-hmm. Certainly did have a good offensive coordinator who's now gone. But I think that ultimately
you need
that
more
is huge.
Consistency
that is
with
huge.
Kentucky. Yeah.
Moving back now to Kentucky, you've got to have some consistency mm-hmm. there, because you can't expect your guys to continue to go through these coaching changes every year. You can't expect that, because they're having first off, they're having to make sure that they know the playbook like inside and out, backwards and forwards for that season, and then you give them a new one. Okay, well, everything, not to say that everything before is out the window, but a new guy comes in, he's got a new system. And he's got this new system, and it could be completely different from what you had before. So that just makes it tough for any quarterback. And then it kind of makes it tough on the rest of the offense, the rest of the team, because the quarterback's out there trying to call new things to them and go over new plays and new systems and new routes. And I mean, routes not maybe necessarily as difficult, but a whole system that can be difficult. I'm not trying to say that any quarterback is dumb, because many quarterbacks are very smart and they pick it up quickly, but it is tough and it hinders them from getting farther faster.
Well, I'm going to put into some comparisons from this division. You look at Georgia up to this year. Usually have been a solid football team. Consistent system under Mark Richt. Alabama, one of the best in the fucking business. Consistent system under Nick Saban. Look at LSU. Yeah, have they fallen back a little bit? Yeah, but they've had a consistent molding under the Mad Hatter and Les Miles. And then you look at Tennessee as of late. Under Butch, the kind of development that they've kind of had. And to me, that's why I say Kentucky, they could be a sleeper, but I think Vanderbilt and Kentucky are they got to make some decisions because, like I said, Mark Stoops, 4th year, this is usually the year where it's like, okay, now it's on you because these guys coming in are your guys. These are the seniors are now the freshmen that you brought in from your first year here. With Derek Mason, it's 3rd year. So, I mean, do you give him one more? Do you hit the panic button for Vanderbilt? I don't really know, but I'm going to let you decide, Brandon. Where do you want to go first? Florida, Tennessee, Georgia. Which team do you want to hit first?
Let's take a look at Georgia.
Well, the big thing for Georgia is new head coach. They got Kirby Smart coming in. I mean, Mark Richt, we talked about him in the ACC preview. He's now in Miami down with the Canes. And I think that Georgia, I am very excited for their future overall. Not just this season, but their future. Because I don't know if it's just me assuming that Kirby Smart is going to be a great head coach just because he came from Alabama, but basically I'm expecting him to be a great head coach because he came from Alabama.
What I think is going to be so interesting for Georgia, and I would expect that things would change, is that you go from Mark Richt, a guy who was completely offensive-minded, and unfortunately things did not work out offensively, and he was supposed to be the offensive mind, and that's when insert Kirby Smart, the defensive mind. Extremely defensive-minded. He was very good for Alabama, and Alabama certainly will miss him. But I think you go from, one end of the spectrum to the other. And I think that really a great thing for Kirby Smart is that he's not only defensive-minded, he's just a smart football guy. He knows he's not necessarily the offensive guy, so what does he go and do? He gets Jim Chaney, quarterback guru, to run his offense. I mean, I think that's perfect. I think that's absolutely perfect. I think that this Georgia team could be very, very dangerous this season. And I think that a part of it is you are getting back Nick Chubb, a guy who was on his way to a fantastic season last year. You lose him to a very serious knee injury. And that's also tough to come back from and be who you were last year. But I think he can do it. And if he does it, I'm not as worried then about the quarterback situation because they're looking at Jacob Eason, Grayson Lambert. Who do we put there? But I think if you have a solid running back, that takes a little bit of the pressure off of any quarterback. It's still a big decision. But I think that you have Nick Chubb in there doing what he needs to do and doing what he does. That is just that much bigger for the offense.
Brandon, I am going to make a straight comparison to the Alabama Crimson Tide here. Maybe because he came from that system, but all you need to be successful in the SEC is just take the mold that Alabama does. A defense that's one of the best in the business. Every year we're talking about Alabama's defense and just how that system just keeps creating like their front seven. Like the defensive linemen are always guys where we're talking about them. Well, you're not talking about them come draft time because you don't like to talk about the draft. I'm talking about them come draft time They're always top first-round picks. That's what you need. You need Kirby Smart just to set his defensive system. And then you look at Alabama. Have Alabama quarterbacks been flashy? Have they been the big names? Jake Coker? No, they haven't. They've been just guys that are enough to get the job done. Who's been the most important part of that offense? Who's been the flashy players?
The running backs.
The running backs.
It's been the running backs.
And that's what you got here. You got Nick Chubb, who is going to lead that team. You've got quarterbacks. I mean, could it be Lambert? Yeah. Could it be Ramsey? Sure. Could it be Eason? I guess. It doesn't matter. It's whichever one is going to get in there and do the job for you. Whichever one's going to do the job. I mean, we look at Alabama, what was it, 2 years ago? When I can't remember who was the quarterback the year before Coker, but it was, we had a quarterback for Alabama, and coming into like game 14, we're like, oh, who's going to be the starter? It doesn't matter because both of them can do the job.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's a big part of it. And really, when you take a look at this, many people will be watching Nick Chubb and how quickly he comes back, and then how well he does when he comes back. You take a look, junior Sonny Michael, he rushed for 1,000 yards last year. He started only 6 games, but he rushed for more than 1,000 yards. And I think that's going to be huge for them, knowing that they still have him in their back pocket, even if Nick Chubb has to take it a little slower when he gets back. The offensive line, they lose 2 starters. And I think that was a big part in why Mark Richt ultimately kind of had his downfall, because they lost those two. Those 2 guys were really struggling for, they lost them, but it's like they lost them last year because they really weren't doing that well. The offensive line was spotty, and I think that's a big reason why they had some of the losses that they did. But this is going to be a defense that Kirby Smart inherits that's already good, that's already got talent, and now he's going to be able to go and mold that talent into an even better group and take some of the guys who were raw talent and really turn them into something special. And
just because I had to look it up because it was driving me crazy, the quarterback for Alabama I was thinking about was Blake Sims. There was a game late in the year where it's like, oh, is Sims not going to start? It doesn't matter. Throw Coker in there.
Yeah.
The last time Alabama had a quarterback that I would say was a big name was A.J. McCarron.
Yes.
That's the last big name quarterback that the Alabama Crimson Tide have. Is it? That's nice?
Also when that's also the last big name girlfriend that I think.
Ask Musburger how Catherine Webb's doing these days, or Catherine McCarron. I'm sorry, she's now Catherine McCarron. I don't even know if she changed her name, but yeah.
I was going to say I should take that back because I believe that Jake Coker's girlfriend was also good looking, but not good looking enough to have Brent Musburger talk about her on TV.
She's still up there. I don't think Brent Musburger did the game. They wouldn't let him near the game. Not this time, but yeah.
So they just asked him to go sit in the stands.
For Georgia, for me, it all comes down to let Kirby Smart mold that defense into what he had at Alabama, get a quarterback who's competent, let Nick Chubb lead that offense and be the superstar. I'm going to ask you, this is how I want to close out the Georgia discussion before we move on into Tennessee. To you, what is a successful season for Georgia? The minimal thing they need to do just to say, oh, that was a good season.
10 wins.
They need 10 wins. If they have anything under 10, you're saying it's a failure. Kirby Smart's an asshole. He can't get the job done.
No, I'm not saying that he can't get the job done, but they had 10 wins last year, and they didn't like it. Mark Richt got fired. They need 10 wins this year for when Kirby Smart comes in. Well, I got 10 wins in my first year. See what I can do in year 2, 3, going forward. So I think at least 10 wins. That's what I think. I mean, they're going to have a struggle. I think going up against Tennessee and Florida. And when I say a struggle, I mean a really good battle, because those 3 teams right there in the East are going to be good.
I think they can get 10 wins. I'm looking at their schedule now. I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for sure. I'm giving them 8 for sure wins The question marks are at Ole Miss. If it was at home, I'd give them the W, but because it's on the road, that's a Chad Kelly-led Rebel team. That could be a loss. The good thing is you get Florida. Yeah, Florida's on a neutral site, but you get Tennessee at home, which is huge. You get Tennessee coming into your place. You don't got to play at Rocky Top. And one of the biggest games, their first non-conference game, a little neutral site game against the Tar Heels from North Carolina.
I think that when the game that I think is possibly the most intriguing out of those is the Ole Miss game, because if you look at Ole Miss last year, there were some games where they would just put up stupid points and you would go, wow.
And then they choke.
They really, really played well, like against Alabama.
Yeah.
But then there would be another game and you'd go,
the Arkansas game.
What are they doing? What are they doing? So I think that that's the game that's most intriguing, because you know what you're going to get a good game out of a game against Tennessee with Georgia. That's going to be a good game. Ole Miss, not to say it's not going to be a good game, but it could be a blowout one way or another. I mean, you just don't know how it's going to go. I don't really expect a whole lot of points being put up against this Kirby Smart defense, to be quite honest with you. Even with the front seven being somewhat inexperienced, he works with them in the offseason, rather, as we're coming up on the season.
Yeah.
I'm hotty-toddy. I'm getting excited.
End of the month, August starts today.
I think that this team is really going to be pretty good. And I could totally see 10 wins this season, maybe more, but 10 definitely should be right there.
I'm going to be honest with Vol Nation and Gator Nation. I'm going to be rooting against you guys this year, only for the reason that Alabama and Georgia don't play each other. I kind of want Georgia to win the East so that we can see an Alabama. Whoops, I kind of spoiled something there. So that we can see Alabama.
It's a big surprise.
And Georgia. That's what I would hope for. That's what I'm hoping for. But moving on into Tennessee, I want to read you a quote from the athlonsports.com preview for Tennessee, and then ask you a question about it. Here's how they start their preview off, and I quote, "Tennessee is the clear favorite to win the SEC East and a legitimate playoff contender," end quote. Brandon, can Tennessee win the East? And if they win the East, do they have a chance? Do they even have a chance to knock off the Crimson Tide and make it to the college football playoff?
Well, do you remember last year? Do you remember this Tennessee team at the beginning of the season? This Tennessee team was pegged as a team to watch.
We bought the hype a little bit.
They were supposed to be
with
like the team in the East and possibly in the SEC. I mean, I just remember they were touted big time, and they had the talent and they had the experience, but what got in the way? Inconsistent offense, and they just went away. They fizzled. Well, it wasn't that they went away. They just lost the big games. No, they fizzled. Yes, they did go away. They did go away. Yes, exactly. They lost the big ones. They went away. They laid down. They rolled over and they played dead.
I don't think, and here's my only disagreement. Yes, at the end of the season were we not focusing on Tennessee as much because by Halloween they had, 4 losses? Yes, but I'm not going to say that they laid down because you see when they played 19 Oklahoma at the time, double overtime thriller. I still remember that. That was basically the Baker Mayfield coming out party. Then you have Florida, they lose by 1. Arkansas, they lose by 4. Alabama, they lose by 5. They were close games. You got to give them credit for having close games. But yeah, they did lose 4 to some pretty big opponents. Arkansas, they probably should have beat.
I think that they're definitely going to have some good pop with Josh Dobbs. Good veteran. He's dynamic. He can make the downfield plays. He's got the talented wide receiver core who can make the big plays down the field. I think it's going to be the passing game. Will that work? Can they light it up? I mean, that's really the big part. The ground game is going to be good. I think that's where they're going to earn a lot of their big gains and a lot of their big plays. But if they can see something out of the passing game like that, Yeah, then you've got the Tennessee team that we thought we were going to get last year. And I think that's huge. They were 92nd in the nation in passing last year. That's not good. I think that really they need to work on that. Again, ground game I think is solid. It's the passing game that Tennessee really has to focus on.
Well, and I'm looking at their schedule, and to me, there are some blatant positives to this schedule, and then there are some blatant just negatives, and like, I'm not too happy about that. The positives, you get Florida at home. You get Alabama at home this year. You get to play Nick Saban and the boys at home. The big ones that are like, I'm not too excited about, like I mentioned not even 5 minutes ago, you're playing Kirby Smart and his team in Athens. Then you're going right after that. You got to go October 1st, you're in Athens. That next week, you're at College Station playing Texas A&M, a Texas A&M team that Kevin Sumlin, we're going to get into him a little bit later. I'm assuming he's going to have his boys fired up because he could be on the hot seat by that week. Needs a big win at home. And then I'm looking at that South Carolina game only because it's on the road. Only because it's on the road, and that late in the season, that could be South Carolina's Super Bowl. Let's knock off the Tennessee Vols, who, if they're undefeated by that time, just beating an Alabama team, beating a Florida team, a Georgia team, looking pretty, that's the trap game. Because if you're undefeated going into that game, you're feeling pretty confident. You just beat Florida and Georgia, the two guys that you're fighting the division with. Oh, and we just beat Alabama. That's right. You're not going to touch us in the title game. That's the trap game, South Carolina.
Well, let me give you this some facts of what happened last year.
Hit me with some cold hard facts.
And you kind of presented by.
I hope we don't get sued for that. But go on.
I didn't say the name. I just said presented by. Anyway, so Tennessee, you said that you didn't think that they went away. No, they didn't go away. Well, here, they completely choked on a big one in the Oklahoma game. I mean, you remember that. That was awful. Florida, they allowed Florida to convert 5 fourth down chances. You should lose if you allow someone to convert 5 fourth down chances. That's pathetic and embarrassing. And then they get pounded to a pulp by Arkansas and Bama. Those games, they lost the time of possession to each by more than 10 minutes. And it was awful. They couldn't handle the big games. All the games I mentioned, Oklahoma, Florida, Arkansas, Bama, big games. If you can't handle the big ones, get out. You get out, go home. You know? I mean, that is really where they struggled. The big games. Not the games that they should win. The games that they needed to win. And they need to do that this year. They need to win those games this year. Oklahoma, that game, that type of game cannot be lost. It has to be won by Tennessee. If they want to come out of this conference, this Eastern Conference, if they want to come out, they need, or rather the East Division in the SEC, they need to be the big dog. They need to win those games. They need to beat up on Arkansas. They need to really give Bama the best shot they've got. That's the only way that you're going to be taken serious.
By Halloween, we should know where this team stands because they've got all their games early. But because we spent so much time on the West, we got to look at Florida. They led the division. Yeah, the East. Did I say the West?
You did.
I meant the East.
I know what you meant.
You guys know what I meant, but we got to look at Florida. They've got a new coach coming in, obviously, because you got Will Muschamp's no longer in the swamp down there in Florida. And to me, I'm kind of worried if I'm a Florida Gator fan because I'm only worried because of Tennessee and because of, and there I go again, Ricky, you can say it again. Oh, well, Ricky, you're buying into the hype of Tennessee. You just talked about how they had to be consistent, but I think they're going to be special. I think even with a loss to Alabama, maybe even a loss to Georgia, maybe they could still win their side of the SEC. And if I'm Florida, I'm not going to say shaking in my boots because, you're still a good football team. However, I would have I'd be readjusting that rearview mirror to look at Tennessee right behind you.
Well, Florida, one of the big things for them is quarterback right out of the gate. That's what you got to look at. And they are looking at transfer Luke Del Rio, the son of Oakland Raiders head coach Jack Del Rio. Also Purdue graduate transfer Austin Appleby. But it looks like right now Luke Del Rio is the favorite to win that one.
Don't let Appleby start.
And
don't let him start.
And here's the thing, is that whoever wins this, though, that it will be the 9th starting quarterback since Tim Tebow in 2009.
Tim Tebow.
That is the number one stat to me. It's 9th quarterback since Tebow in 2009. It's 2016. I mean, I just feel like you had no consistency. You've had no consistency since Tebow. And yes, I get it. Guys like Tim Tebow in college, people can say whatever they want about him, how he did afterwards. But in college, it's a special type of player.
Oh, he's one of the best
Tim
college
Tebow,
players, yeah.
That, for all those years, you get lucky when you have a guy like that. And I get that. But Florida needs to find that again. Because without that, that's tough. And then you have when you have an offensive line that gives up a nation-leading 45 sacks, it doesn't help that you're changing quarterbacks every other game. Doesn't help.
Here's my key stat. I'm going to bring a key stat to the Florida conversation here. 0.412. That was Florida's field goal percentage last year. Guess what about every other team in all of college football hit? About 60% from the kicking game. Yeah, that ain't good. That ain't good. Those are the points you need to grab, because when you get down the field and your quarterback can't get you into the end zone, you got to grab 3 points. You can't be going into the red zone or past the 40 and not coming up with 3 points. To me, that's another thing where quarterbacks got to be key, but you got to kick those field goals. You got to get those through the uprights. John Madden, boom. Get them into the uprights. That's what you got to do. You got to improve that stat, because if you're missing out on points like that, I don't even want to see you play Georgia and Tennessee, because they will maul you.
Yeah, that's not good. That's not good at all. And I think that now another part of it is that Florida defensively, their defensive line is good. They've got a really solid spot there. And they're pretty deep.
He didn't do all bad things there. I mean, the defense was one good thing he did, right?
Yeah. That actually is a good thing that Muschamp left behind. He left behind a really good defense. However, it's the off. I mean, if your offense is off the field like that, your defense is tired. It's like having a bullpen that can't go, because they've been pitching 3+ innings for the last 10 days. Enter the White Sox. But I think that ultimately this offense is the spot that needs to be touched the biggest. The biggest. That does not make sense. That sentence was awful. But they have to be looked at the most. You have a really good receiver in Antonio Callaway. It's really the guys who you look at on the other side, like who is going to go next to him. I mean, I'm really not sure. So you got Ahmad Fullwood, Josh Hammond, Dre Massey. The list goes on, but you've got Dre Massey, a JUCO product here. He's going to be competing with Brandon Powell for reps. So that it's really kind of, you've got guys who look the part. Callaway's really good. He's their top playmaker. But who's going to get him the football? That's the question. It all comes back to who's going to be the quarterback. Because you got guys who can be good and who have explosiveness and who are really good talents. But who throws them the quarterback consistently? And how good are they going to be under center? I think that's a huge question mark. It is for me, but maybe it's not going to be as much of an issue. That's why I kind of put Florida right now. If you're talking a top 3 of Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida, Florida is the number 3. Florida's the number 3.